Inheriting a pair of yin and yang eyes that can see ghosts, is it just to attract ghosts and fuck me? Wait a minute, you and my wife's grandfather are from the same era. Don't call me brothers. If I'm not happy today, I'll have to deal with you. We've all gone abroad, why do we still have peers? From the perspective of modern, ordinary people, tell stories about urban supernatural beings and ancient Chinese gods. Chapter 1. Eating Yangjian rice and taking the road of the underworld. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. 6 Ding and 6 Jia Yin Yang Immortals. The 5 rampant soldiers and horses collect injustice. Souls Beidu's 7 steps to eliminate evil. There is a witness everywhere. In 1956, the nationalist government organized a large-scale excavation activity for the imperial tombs. This excavation involved multiple historical dynasties, including the Han, Tang, Song, Wei, Jin, Southern and Northern dynasties. On the morning of July 3 at 6 o'clock, a tomb of the Northern Wei Emperor located in the suburbs of Qiantong City was finally opened after continuous combat by archaeologists the night before. Generally, archaeological work is not conducted at night, and this situation is indeed unique. As the last layer of stone roof above the entrance passage of the tomb was cut open, a moist and deathly gray-black atmosphere erupted in an instant. A young man in his 20s saw this scene and immediately shouted loudly at the workers working around the cave entrance. Everyone cover their mouths and noses, step back 50 meters. Meanwhile, the young man rushed straight towards the entrance of the cave. Strangely, he was not wearing work clothes, nor was he wearing a work badge, and he was wearing a bright yellow Taoist robe, particularly eye-catching among a group of white coats. Upon hearing the young man's shout, 2 workers immediately covered their mouths and noses, turned their heads, and ran away. They had just held up their electric hammer and looked exhausted, but now they were running like rabbits. A gray-black mist surged out, and one worker didn't react and was directly enveloped by the mist rushing out. Get out! A big hand reached into the mist and grabbed the worker's clothes on the back, pulling him out with one hand. After being pulled out, the worker lay straight on the ground, with exposed skin as if corroded and blood-stained. His mouth and nose were also bleeding, and he seemed to have difficulty breathing. I saw the young man raise his other hand, gently shaking the yellow bell in his hand, muttering words in his mouth. I respectfully request the Southern Fire Belt Divine General, the Divine Bell Officer and Soldier, to leave the southern region and close the prison gate. Urgency is like a law. As soon as the young man finished speaking, a firelight shot out from the bell, rising in the face of the storm. The firelight transformed into a dragon, tightly covering the entrance of the cave, which was still emitting gray-black mist. The scorching fire and wind directly suppressed the mist back into the cave entrance. Soda solution, pour it in. As the mist was suppressed, 2 medical staff quickly pushed the medical bed up and carried away the convulsing worker lying on the ground. Then a steel water pipe extended into the hole, and at the other end of the pipe was connected to a water pump, which was running frantically. The arm-thick steel pipe poured the white liquid from the pool into the hole as if it were free of charge. A person wearing a white coat and a badge walked over cautiously, with a big belly and a flushed face, indicating that he should be a leader. Taoist, what is this mist? Don't call me Taoist, it's not from the same family. Seeing the young man inexplicably getting angry, his white coat shrank its head and didn't dare to continue speaking, as if the young man in front of him was somewhat afraid. After all, if it really angers a young person, the bell in his hand can turn around and burn him to ashes in less than 10 minutes. Just call Mr. 1, this mist is generated by the volatilization of concentrated sulfuric acid, mixed with a hint of ghostly aura. You all know that I asked you to prepare the soda solution in advance, haven't you read chemistry? A young man in his 20s next to his bloated white coat began to murmur in confusion when he heard the young man say so. No, even if concentrated sulfuric acid evaporates, its mist will not be so thick. Moreover, how much pure sulfuric acid does it have below it? According to ancient production techniques, it is impossible to produce such a large amount of pure sulfuric acid. Oh, nerd, have you studied chemistry? Come on, and explain to me why the bell in my hand can spew fire. Master, that's not right. Mr. Wen, if you continue, we won't disturb you. Whatever you need us to do, just give us your orders. This young man, dressed in a Taoist robe and very arrogant, is my grandfather, a yin-yang master who eats in the mortal world and walks the path of the underworld. And this matter was told to me by the young man who was mocked by my grandfather. My name is Warmth, and my name sounds like a girl, but I am a genuine old man. Let's start the story when I was young. I was born and my parents took me to live in the suburbs of Qiantong City, where my family was quite poor. My father makes a living by working part-time and moving goods for others. He goes out early and comes back late every day, while my mother takes me home. My family rented a bungalow in a large courtyard. In addition to the landlord living in a 5-story small building, there are about 5 or 6 bungalows in the courtyard. We are in the innermost one. When I was 100 days old, something strange happened. According to what my mom told me, it was still winter at that time. That morning, my dad rode his tricycle early at around 5 o'clock to unload the goods for others. Because it was my 100th day, my mother went to the landlord's house to borrow some pastry and make oil-fried cakes to celebrate. That morning, my mother started busy cooking and even used a red pen from somewhere to make a small red dot on my forehead. I don't cry or make a fuss, I lie quietly on the kong, with only my mother's busy voice in the whole room. Everything was ready, and the golden fried cake exploded in a bowl. My mother wiped her sweat and sat down to tease me. At this moment, a melodious singing sound came from the yard. Grandparents, come and see, my grandson is standing at this entrance, wishing you all great wealth, give your grandson a living meal, you all live long and have healthy children and grandchildren, let my grandson also come and shine. At this time, thick smoke is coming from the chimneys of several households. The oil cakes at home have already been fried and the vegetables have been cut. I will stir-fry them when my dad comes back. Bang bang bang. A gentle knock on the door came. My mother actually got up to open the door and take a look when she heard a shout in the yard. When she knocked on the door, she had already grabbed the doorknob. As soon as I opened the door, I found the person standing at the door. That person is about 1.9 meters tall, blocking the entrance by 80.9%. He has long and big hair, which is not dirty, but fluffy. My clothes are all patched, probably sewn together from fabric picked up from the garbage heap. It's winter, wearing several layers, I look colorful all over. Although I knew there was someone outside when I opened the door, my mother was still startled when she opened it. After all, she was such a unique foodie, a homeless person, and so tall. There was only my mother, a woman of 20.7 or 8, and me at home. Are you hungry? Wait for me for a while. Begging for food but never speaking, his eyes kept smiling as he walked through my mother and looked at me lying on the kong. Turning around, my mother took my milk powder bag and put 5 oil cakes on the stove first. Wiping her hands, my mother began to dig out her pocket, trying to find some money. After all, today is my 100 days, and a homeless person has arrived. Give me some money to try to win the lottery. But after pulling it out several times and realizing it wasn't there, I awkwardly glanced at the person and then turned to look for it on the kong. That person remained silent and stared at me with a smile on his face, while I didn't cry or make a fuss, eating my hands on my own. Hard work pays off for those who have a heart. Find a penny under the innermost edge of the kong, and if you really search through the house, it's only a penny. Take the money, pick up the oil cake in the milk powder bag, and take 2 steps to pass it to the person. The person took the food and money, smiled, turned his head from my doorstep, and walked straight out of the yard. Other aunties wanted to ask him for something to eat, but he ignored them. Not long after, my dad rode his tricycle back, and as soon as he entered the door, he shouted, "It's so cold. Why has the weather become so bad? It's frostbitten Xiao Gao's hands. Xiao Gao is a young man brought by my father who works nearby. My mom saw him constantly muttering, so she said, just now our family came to beg for food, and I brought him some oil cakes. It's quite strange. They look tall and big, and they only look like they're in their 40s. Why should we just be begging for food? My dad was taken aback after listening because there were many homeless people in that era and they often entered the yard, but he had never heard my mom describe it in such a strange tone before. But my dad still responded with a nonchalant attitude, no matter how tall you are, you're lazy. Being lazy is like begging for food. But we are going to ask for mantu from the second aunt next door. He didn't want it. He didn't talk when he opened the door. He just stared at the child and was happy. When my dad heard this, he seemed to think of something and his face became a bit serious. What does this person look like? Is he wearing a particularly thick red rope as a waistband around his waist? I didn't pay attention to the other person's belt clearly. What do I think this is? He looks like he's just begging for food, but he's taller than us. My dad finished listening and turned his head to look at me, but he didn't speak. Around 1:30 p.m., Xiao Gao arrived and before entering the door, a voice came in, sheeping, let's go. Let's ride 3 rounds on wheels, it's already 2 o'clock. Xiao Gao, come in and have a drink of water. You can go by yourself in the afternoon. Anyway, that's all you have to do. My dad opened the door and said to Xiao Gao outside. After hearing this, Xiao Gao's expression showed a hint of panic and he quickly asked. Brother, are you not going? I'm not familiar with you if you don't go to my place. Why did you argue with your sister? Law. No, you go to the east gate of Qiantong Park. When the truck arrives, you can ride it over, pull the things, and unload them at the entrance of that restaurant. Okay brother, then I'll go now. My nephew is 100 years old today. I'll come back tonight to take a car and cut some meat for him to eat. After leaving from a young age, my father sat at the entrance all afternoon, smoking his own cigarette, one after another. My mom went out several times to let him in and asked him what was wrong. My dad didn't say anything and just looked at the intersection in the distance. I didn't come back until dinner that night. After dinner, my dad spoke up and let out a soft sigh, this is fate, right? Chapter 2. Seeing Ghosts in the Day. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. When I can remember something, I vaguely remember a few strange things. Although my home is in the north, summer is also very hot. At that time, we didn't even have a fan, let alone air conditioning. So the windows at home are not closed when sleeping at night, and the curtains are not pulled, otherwise the room will be too stuffy and hot at night. I remember one night, because it was hot, I woke up in the middle of the night. When I saw my parents still asleep, I didn't cry. I sat up against the wall because it was slightly cooler and faster. The windows at home are low, from which you can see the yard. The summer night is not too dark, and under the dim moonlight, one can vaguely see the outline of the tricycle parked in the yard. Because we live near the suburbs, we can still see a few fireflies flickering. Just as I was staring intently at the fireflies in the yard, an unpleasant sound came from outside the window. Hee hee. Turning her head, she saw an old lady clutching the window and patting the glass with both hands. However, this old lady seems to be very old, with wrinkles on her face like tree bark from over a decade, and large black spots on her face. Her gray-white hair is only a few strands left, hanging on her wrinkled head like this. There were no teeth left in my mouth, and my 2 eye sockets sank deeply without a trace of expression. I opened my big mouth and made a whooshing sound, my eyes fixed on me so tightly. I remember very clearly, although this old lady kept staring at me with her hollow eyes and slapping the glass with both hands, there was no sound of smashing the glass, only an extremely unpleasant hee-hee sound. At the moment I discovered her, I didn't feel hot anymore and started crawling towards her direction bit by bit. By the way, the heated Kong is still not low. Generally, a person about 1.7 meters tall would have to lift their buttocks to get on the Kong, but at that time, it seemed like the only thing in my eyes was the old lady who was crawling towards her. As I was about to climb up to the edge of the Kong, unfortunately, I kicked my dad's head. He grumbled and then flipped over to continue sleeping. However, after a moment, my dad sat up with a swoop. Seeing me crawling towards the edge of the Kong, he picked me up and thought I was going to the bathroom. He vaguely hugged me and was about to go down. But although I was lifted up, my hands and feet did not stop, and I continued to crawl. My head kept looking out the window. My dad saw my strange appearance and looked in the direction of my head. Pop. Immediately after, a slap hit my head. As soon as I felt the pain, I stopped looking at the old lady and was about to cry. My dad quickly covered my mouth and then gestured in the air with his other hand. A moment later, a faint golden light shot out of my dad's hand and straight towards the old lady outside the window. Immediately after, the old lady melted like a snowflake falling onto the stove. At this moment, my mom also woke up and asked my dad what he was doing. My dad said I needed to go to the bathroom, then turned on the flashlight and took me out of the hospital. My mom turned around and went to sleep again. Soon, I can run back and forth in the yard. I still remember the first time I ran was because the big rooster raised by the second ant next door chased after me, and blood was seen on my arms, but it didn't affect my exploration of the yard. Until one summer evening, I lay on the felt cloth of the coal pile, holding a small hammer in my hand, playing happily. Suddenly, I felt so cold, so I continued to drill into the felt cloth. Accidentally, I lifted my head. I saw half a person on the third floor wall of the landlord's 5- or 6-story building. Why is it said to be half a person? Because her upper body is perpendicular to the wall and protrudes, her lower body seems to grow inside the wall. Her clothes were similar to those of the beautiful fairy in Journey to the West, but her hair was messy and scattered. And the whole head seemed to have only one layer of skin attached, drooping on the shoulders of her extended upper body. As I looked at her, her head turned like a ball, and slowly, her face rushed towards me. There was a big opening in her mouth, opening and closing one by one, and then red liquid fell to the ground one by one. I seemed to be afraid of the cold out of curiosity. I threw my small hammer and crawled out of the coal pile, keeping my head up and staring at the half-person wearing floral clothes. However, my body slowly walked directly below her. The red patch on the ground was getting closer and closer to me, and I finally heard her roaring like something. Her voice was as unpleasant as my dad using a hacksaw to clean a steel pipe. I moved directly below her, but didn't step on the red water, so I looked up at her. Hee hee, hee hee, hee hee. I feel like she's also staring at me. Pa, suddenly, there was a crisp sound of glass cracking, and I saw a whole piece of glass on the 4th floor, detached from the window frame and bigger than my little blanket, flying out. The glass at the landlord's house is very nice, a bit dark blue, but this color looks much darker in the evening, like a mirror. As she fell in front of the person on the 3rd floor, she suddenly flew out and crawled into the glass, making her look more like a mirror. This terrifying mirror flipped over and fell from above. Every time it turned towards me, I could see a strange half-person, with her whole head tied to her body like a rope, swinging back and forth. Her arms were waving wildly, like objects. But in my ear, I could clearly hear the sound coming from above, growing louder and louder. It was definitely her voice. I saw a gray and slightly orange sky, gradually falling with the glass and turning into a deep blue, until I could see nothing except for that woman. Pa, schwa. This is the sound of glass covering my head and shattering all over the ground. Next, I heard the creaking sound of the yard gate, as well as the screams of my mother and the heavy footsteps coming over. In the first few seconds of losing consciousness, I heard my dad's voice, but he wasn't talking, he was shouting a bunch of incomprehensible words loudly. After shouting, I felt a big hand pressing on top of my head. I knew it was my dad coming, and then I lost consciousness. I don't remember what happened when I woke up again. When I became sensible and asked my parents, they said I had read too much about Journey to the West, but the glass upstairs broke and hit me. But as they turned their heads, I could see the faint fear in my mother's eyes and the flash of anger in my father's eyes. Chapter 3. The White Bear Monster and Big Dog Brother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At that time, my family was very poor, so after I was injured, I went to a clinic and simply applied some medicine and bandaged it. It's not a serious injury, so I'll go home and take care of it. Fortunately, within a few days, the wound had almost healed. When I was recuperating, I was always at home. My parents didn't allow me to go out, so the wound healed. After my parents agreed, I quickly ran out to have fun. I vaguely remember that every morning my dad would go out early to work, while my mom would take me home, tidy up the house, and cook. And I am the most restless age, and my small yard can no longer satisfy me. I am very eager for the lively streets and alleys outside the yard. Behind that iron gate must be another world, because my mother has carried me out before. Not far away, you can see the sky-like scenery in Journey to the West on TV. The 2 rows of people next to them were like immortals, some sitting and some standing, with various fruits and vegetables placed in front of them, resembling the appearance of the Tianting Peach Festival in the first episode of Journey to the West. These immortals all have hair and talk a lot. Another day at noon, I found a good thing on the big iron gate. It was square and heavy like my hammer, like a treasure from Journey to the West. So, I grabbed this good treasure and shouted loudly, "Good baby. Go." Sure enough, it didn't disappoint me. It flew very fast and flew straight towards the big iron gate. I will definitely use my treasure well to open this door, see those immortals again, maybe the Jade Emperor is also here. I thought to myself. Bang! What are you doing, little bastard? A familiar roar came from behind me. Wow! As expected, he was beaten again. But there's still a good thing. My mom opened the latch for me the next day, allowing me to play in the alley. So she sat on the stone at the entrance, knitting a sweater, and I ran happily in my new territory. I will be able to run around the alleys every afternoon in the future, and as I see more people, my courage starts to increase. I won't hide from them anymore. My favorite among them is the White Bear Monster. The White Bear Monster is a very tall person, wearing a large robe, just like the Black Bear Monster in Journey to the West, dressed in colorful pieces. His hair is vigorous, just like a big bear, but he is very white, so I call him the White Bear Monster. Every time he sees me, he squats down and plays with me for half a day. But strangely, whenever my mom comes out to see me and I want to tell her I have an old friend, he disappears. It's worth mentioning that at the deepest part of the alley, sometimes a boy about my age comes out and we play together. His yard is the same size as mine, but there is a big pot in it. I don't care about that. I focus on the iron mesh barrel next to the big pot. There will be many delicious deep-fried dough sticks in it later. As long as I stare at it for a while, his parents will give me a deep-fried dough sticks that has just been cooked. Usually I hold the big deep-fried dough sticks and run home to sit on the small bench where my mother sits to chew it. After eating it, I remember that a child is waiting for me to play. From time to time, the two of us often play together, sometimes with the addition of the White Bear Monster, but the White Bear Monster seems to dislike playing with that child. Slowly, I also learned how to open the latch of the big iron door. After patrolling my yard, I ran out to find them to play with. Of course, I remember my mother's words, not giving way to the alley entrance, and most importantly, I remember that after encountering my father outside the alley, I still felt a lot of pain from being beaten. On a day in the autumn when I was 4 years old, just as it was getting dark, my dad went out, and my mom was making blankets and heating the con. I was about to get up too. Because the day before yesterday, I made an agreement with the children to play with my hammer together. That means smashing and knocking on the road surface of the alley, then knocking on the first big iron door of the alley a few times until a very fierce old man comes out to chase us. Today was no exception. The old man came out to chase us again. We ran to his gate together. Every time the old man went out to chase us for 2 steps, he went back. He didn't enjoy himself, so we went into his house to eat deep-fried dough sticks. But as soon as I walked in today, I found an extra person next to the big pot. In addition to his parents, he also has a big brother. His father is facing us with his back while we are looking for delicious deep-fried dough sticks in the pot. The big brother is standing behind his father and also facing us with his back. But that big brother has a dog's tail behind his butt. It's strange, but it doesn't feel much. After all, I saw Sun Dashing beating his bull head too long. The two of us were drooling as we approached. When her mother saw that we were back, she smiled and took out a big deep-fried dough sticks from the pot, ripped 2 halves from the middle, and handed us 1.5. At this moment, his father also turned around and looked at us, emitting hearty laughter. At this moment, the big brother also turned his head to look at us. It was only then that I realized that he not only had a dog tail, but also a dog face. A normal dog is cute no matter how long it looks, but this big brother's dog face is too scary. His mouth went straight to the base of his ears, his long tongue was black, and the row of pointed teeth below drooped, almost reaching his chin. Paired with Bisonson's big pointed teeth the size of my thumb, he was gasping for breath and drooling kept dripping. The furry face is also black, with 2 big eyes as big as eggs, and a black kernel as big as a pencil tip in the middle of the blood-red eyes. I only noticed when I turned around that he was wearing human clothes, without shoes, feet, and hands. No, he should be called 4 big claws, similar to human hands but with very long nails, looking at us. I was shocked, and deep-fried dough sticks fell to the ground. I turned to look at my little friend. He seemed not to see the dog man, but he was still happy with his father and ate while he was happy. At this time, his mother saw that I had dropped deep-fried dough sticks, so she took another one and handed it to me. Then she picked it up from the ground, blew it, and ate it herself. I looked at the deep-fried dough sticks in my hand, looked at them who didn't find anything, and looked at the big dog brother. The big brother also wants to eat deep-fried dough sticks. Chapter 4. Grandparents. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. When I shouted, Big Brother also wants to eat big deep-fried dough sticks, they didn't seem to respond. Apart from the big dog brother frowning and staring at me, the atmosphere in the yard was still cheerful and harmonious. His father just shifted his gaze from his son to me. After laughing, I rubbed my head with a big hand full of oil, and then turned to continue to pick up deep-fried dough sticks with a metal clip in the smoking pot. The fragrant smell spread throughout the yard. That big dog brother still keeps staring at me. His eyebrows should be called eyebrows, after all, his face looks a bit like a human face. However, the face is still the furry face of a dog, with a flat, round white furry spot above the blood-red big eyes, which is the kind of 4-eyed dog. After seeing everyone ignoring my words, the eerie corners of my mouth widened even wider, accompanied by half-squinted eyes and 2 white spots that trembled slightly on my face. It was very eerie. Is he laughing at me? So I became angry and ashamed, shouting loudly. There's a brother dog. He wants to eat deep-fried dough sticks, too. Then I raised my hand and grabbed the deep-fried dough sticks and motioned. He's so tall. His tail is so big. The child next to him began to feel a bit confused, so suddenly, he became excited. Let's fight the dog monster together. Fight the monster. My old grandson is also here. Then he turned his head and ran back, taking another big turn. His playful appearance was truly adorable. Let's go beat the dog monster and use stones to beat the dog monster's door. Oh, I'm another loyal fan of Journey to the West, and I've probably replaced the bad old man with a dog monster again. I was really anxious and kept saying, "It's right in front of you." But my anxious expression was even cuter, making the two adults laugh happily. That big dog brother continued to mock me with his eerie expression, even taking 2 steps towards me. He also reached out his big paw and rubbed my head like an adult, so I started dancing and avoiding, gesturing and shouting. My good friend became even more enthusiastic when he saw me like this. So in a courtyard, there was a big pot of deep-fried dough sticks cooking delicious food. 2 adults beside them laughed while working, and 2 children were full of fun. I see no one can understand me, so I want to go home. Holding my big deep-fried dough sticks, I ran to the door. When I turned around, I saw a man at the door. It was the white bear monster, and by this time I had almost run to the gate, only to find him smiling as he watched us making such a fuss. He even nodded at the big dog brother. So I also turned my head to look. When the big dog brother saw the white bear monster, he raised his furry paws a few times and couldn't tell the expression on his face. He bared his big teeth and exhaled loudly. Sure enough, the monsters are all a group, including the white bear monster, big dog brother, and that scary ancient sister. I ran home without looking back. My mother was sitting on a small bench filling the stove with coal. I didn't even bother to eat deep-fried dough sticks. I began to tell my mother that my good friend had a big brother. Of course, I can't remember the specific conversation clearly. In the end, my mother smiled at me, listened to me finish, and then began to take out Tang poetry books to tell me the story of Shan Yu's escape at night when the moon was dark and the wind was high. Actually, not long after this incident, our whole family moved out. I remember that day, I cried for a long time before going out, and even cried all the way on the long-distance bus. Because I seem to know that I will never see the white bear monster and good friends again, nor will I see the big dog brother who can carry me around. At the same time, there is another thing that pains me, which is that both of my boxes of toys were thrown into the garbage dump at the entrance of the alley by my dad. In the car, I tightly held on to my little mouse piggy bank, a picture book of gourd dolls, and a Tang poem. I still remember that morning it was very cold and in the car it was very hot. I slept and cried and slept several times before reaching the finish line. When I woke up in the dark, the car stopped at a village intersection. My mother hugged me and got off the car with her luggage. As for my dad, he returned a few days early. As soon as we got off the car, many people surrounded us. Some took the luggage from my mom's hand, while others came up to pinch my face. So a bunch of people escorted us to the entrance of a dilapidated courtyard, and they all left. What makes me happy is that there are several little ones who are about the same age as me. We have already made friends and will go play with them tomorrow. This should be my first time coming back to my house. The yard is made of earth walls, and the house is also made of earth, all yellow. The yard is very large, more than 10 times larger than the previous yard. But the yard doesn't have the big iron door that I'm familiar with, or even a door. It's just a bunch of big wooden sticks made of wire. A kind old man came over and pushed hard, while my mother carried my luggage with her and entered. After entering, my mother asked me to call him Grandpa, and I called him. The old man was very happy and even carried me all the way into the house. That old man, no, my grandfather, held me and put me on the Kong at home. After putting me down, I went out with my parents. Before I could take off my shoes, I stood up and walked back and forth on the Kong, looking around the room. The room is slightly larger than the previous one, and the layout is similar. There is a window on the other side of the Kong, and 2 cabinets on the opposite side. It's just that there's no TV on top, and there are also 2 red cabinets with 2 red kettles. They probably haven't been used before, except for a little dust, they still look very new. I jumped off the Kong, and after sleeping for half a day, I am now very energetic. I need to patrol my new territory well. So I left the room, and there was a large red cabinet at the end of the living room in the middle. There was a small table on top of it, with 2 books placed next to each other. At that time, I couldn't see that high. It was when my grandfather brought me in. The 2 books are slightly yellow in color, and strangely, there is no sun dashing or hulua outside the books that I like, not even a word. And there is a small incense burner in front of the small table on the cabinet, with 3 almost burned incense sticks inserted on it. I really like iron gadgets, and I also had my mom bring back my small hammer. I lost several locks on the big iron door while playing with them. But the feeling this small incense burner gives me is that I don't want to pick it up and play, but I want to lightly touch it. At the other end of the living room was another living room, and I struggled to pull open the wooden door. Opening the door curtain, I found that my parents and grandfather were both here, and there was still an old lady lying on the Kong. When the old lady saw the door open, she looked over. In that moment, I felt a bit chilly. Just holding my mother's leg, she picked me up and asked me to call her grandmother. I dare not speak up because last time I felt this cold, I was smashed by the glass. My grandmother has a pale face, silver hair, and feels very old. She watched me struggle to squeeze out a smile and said, "Sherlin, look, he can feel that I am the little man of our family. My grandfather's name is Sherlin." At this moment, he sat by the Kong, holding my grandmother's hand and nodding vigorously, with a hint of crying, "Yes, it's our little man, it's our grandson." I don't know why, but I feel very uncomfortable and sad in this atmosphere, so I tightly hugged my mother's neck. Not long after, my grandmother left. Now, she should be a girl in her 20s. Chapter 5. Magical Cheat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 6. Can this cat speak? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fortunately, I didn't lose this game, it's my turn to hide. As for where to hide, I have been optimistic about it since the last game, and I guarantee that the most difficult to find is a thatched cottage outside my second uncle's yard. That thatched cottage is about a dozen square meters in size, with half of the corn stalks and corn cobs piled inside. Originally, this small house was very tidy, with bundles of corn stalks stacked vertically and corn cobs packed in bags and stacked again. Now it's in a mess, the corn stalks are a bit rotten, and the bag containing the corn cobs has also torn due to being stored for a long time, causing the corn cobs to leak all over the ground. Because my second uncle is not here this spring. I used to come to the south of the village to play, and when I got tired from being wild, I brought my friends to Uncle Air's house. He is also a kind old man. In summer, when we come, he will cut a watermelon, and in winter, he will also bring us prepared New Year's goods to eat. He is the only one at home, and we will probably bring him some excitement. His son also lives in the north and has a new courtyard, so this courtyard has been abandoned for over half a year this year. I estimate they dare not enter. I didn't dare to, after all, nobody would enter the courtyard at night, so I hid in a thatched cottage at the door. After entering, I sat on the corn cob bag behind the door. After all, it was messy inside and there were many small insects in the summer. I didn't want spiders to get into my clothes. Through the window of the thatched cottage, one can see that the yard is now empty, except for the well that presses water, which is still empty. I just sat a bit bored, quietly listening to the outside noise. They had already come for the third time and passed by without even looking in. Not long after, the outside was quiet again, and I still scanned the yard bored, thinking about when I was watching the stars and eating melon seeds in the yard with second uncle. He told me many fun stories. What kind of land grandfather suppresses the evil white fox, and what kind of dragon king in the neighboring village temple who illegally changes the river channel is being chased and beaten by the general. When I heard about the 5 mysteries and 3 mysteries at that time, by the time I found out that these were all true stories, it was already later. As I was immersed in memories, my gaze swept through the window of the house where the second uncle lived, and suddenly a yellow shadow flashed inside. I thought I was dizzy, rubbed my eyes, and continued to look, but there was nothing left. Only then did I realize that there was a faint black mist in the room, which seemed to block my line of sight. I'm not a fool. I stand up, go out, turn my head, and walk in one go. Besides, those few things happened when I was a child. Although my family members all agree that my imagination is too rich, my grandfather is just someone who plays the suona and small drums for others. Besides, I haven't seen anything again in recent years, which shows that I can distinguish between imagination and reality when I understand better. But I would be foolish to believe it, those things have really happened. At least, if you encounter anything abnormal, just avoid it first. I was walking out for 2 steps when I heard a meow from behind its abnormal. Whoever's cat flashed by would have a black mist. I paused for a moment, then took a big step and walked. As I walked, a burst of laughter came from behind. That was human laughter, indistinguishable from male and female, but the voice was particularly sharp, mixed with the unique whirring sound of cats. It's the kind of sound made by scratching the cat's neck, as if it has a heart-wrenching magic, but at the same time it's particularly unpleasant, like fingernails scratching the blackboard. So I turned around and saw the cat sitting at the wellhead, enjoying itself and looking at me. It was all orange and mixed with black stripes, probably an adult cat, but not old. Isn't this the cat that my second uncle keeps? Why are you still here and still laughing? Have you become a sperm? That cat has always been very cold and aloof in my impression. Every time I go home, the cat is lying on the black and white TV, looking at the people in this room with an irresistible expression. When I was tired, I jumped down and went out to bask in the sun by the well. If I wanted to touch it, I would have to scratch it with my paws. Only my second uncle was allowed to hold it. I remember it was a mother cat. At this point, I was not afraid anymore. Anyway, I could see everything clearly in the yard, so I turned my head and walked straight into the yard. The cat was lying on the wellhead, and when it saw me passing by, it moved to the side as if gesturing for me to sit down. So I sat down directly, and with curiosity, I asked it, "Did you just laugh? Can you speak then?" That cat looks like a person, giving me a white glance. "Yes, why did you come over today? Miss your second uncle. You really know how to do it. It's amazing. We're playing hide and seek, why didn't you talk before?" As I spoke, I extended my left hand out. Although I knew it might be scratched, I still wanted to touch it. This should be a sign of low hand. Your second uncle won't let me talk. After speaking, it saw my hand gradually reaching out and was about to touch it. It let out a whimper, "Don't touch me." Then it tilted its head and looked at my hand, wanting to reach out and scratch me. I don't have time to pull back my hand. This guy always scratches people hard, and even a few times he's scratched me and it's bleeding. I became nervous and waited for 3 more scratches to appear on my hand, but its claws extended out without scratching me. Its eyes were fixed on my bracelet, and it said in a sharp voice, "What did your grandfather give you? That old man still hurts you." I chuckled and quickly withdrew my hand, carrying a heart full of curiosity. "Yeah, why didn't you scratch me? You used to scratch me quite hard before. Why are you still here? The yard is no longer inhabited, how can you talk? Are you a monster? Are you cannibalistic? Are you also like the monsters on TV, sucking on the living person's yang energy, and then the living person withers? Why don't I suspect it's harming my second uncle? Every time my second uncle holds it, he's as close as holding his own child. How could that be?" I raised my hand and started smoking, just like the person on TV who had been drained of yang energy while asking, "You're such a silly kid. Hurry up and go back. That kid from the Zhao family came to see you." As soon as I heard it, the people outside were shouting closer and closer. "Silly kid, don't tell anyone about me when you go out. I don't want to be beaten." After finishing speaking, the big yellow cat jumped down and then jumped onto the windowsill, standing and looking at me. "Okay, I won't say it. If you're hungry, go to the north and find me. I have food at home." After finishing speaking, I also stood up and rushed out of the door. A light sentence came from behind, "Silly kid." I walked to the entrance and turned around to take a look. At this moment, the moonlight scattered in the courtyard, especially soft and peaceful. The big cat lay on the windowsill, with its head facing the room and its tail hanging by the windowsill, swaying and swaying. Although the empty room at first made me feel a bit scared, now, looking at this courtyard, I feel particularly lonely. As for whether I will say it or not when I go home, don't worry, of course not. It's not just because of the instructions from the big yellow cat, but no matter what I say, my parents always try to fool me. Although I started feeling curious and a bit dissatisfied, over time, I realized it didn't matter anymore. There are some things that I just want to know for myself. Besides, those things are so scary and indeed very dangerous. My parents may have been hiding from me to protect me. Chapter 7. These two people can get along. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 8. Go to your glory and prosperity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Let me down, Brother Wu. Fuck him. This guy is already in heaven, and his mouth is still not clean. Now his hands and feet are waving wildly, but it can be imagined that he has no leverage in the air, and his thin arms and legs are hitting Lu Wei's flesh, almost like tickling. After listening, Lu Wei raised his arm higher and shook the cargo as he lifted it. At the same time, the chubby guy and I also walked up to Lu Wei's side. The chubby guy was holding 2 chopsticks in his hand and staring fiercely at the people in front of him. They should be a group of about 5 or 6 people. The person in the middle is not wearing a school uniform. They are about 1.6 meters tall and have the same hairstyle as a trendy internet celebrity at the time. They are quite handsome. But I found a faint black aura lingering on his forehead, rising from between his eyebrows to beneath his thick bangs. The person slowly walked out with a smile on his face, as if it wasn't his friend being picked up. "Brother, my name is Wu Ronghua. Give me face and let him down." Lu Wei's side light swept away, "What kind of face are you? Damn it, what kind of glory, wealth, and prestige are you?" Wu Ronghua's face darkened after listening, his eyebrows furrowed tightly, but for a moment he regained his smile and took 2 more steps forward. "Haha, this brother, my friend is impulsive. I apologize for him. After speaking, turn your head to me and nod at me, sorry, you guys can eat here, let's find a place." When he finished speaking, the younger brothers behind him were so surprised that their eyeballs were about to fall out. They were just staring at us angrily. Especially there was a chubby person inside who was even fatter than the chubby one, and they looked at each other as if they were gathering anger. "Brother Wu, I." The person in the air also stopped waving and looked at Wu Ronghua with an incredulous expression. "This is quite decent." After Lu Wei finished speaking, he casually threw it back into their team for that kid. Wu Ronghua saw this and smiled at us again, then turned around and left with the group of people. When he walked up to the person who had just been lifted up, he suddenly slapped the back of the person's neck and spoke as he walked. "I just got punished, and if I get punished again, I won't be the captain of the sports team anymore. Be careful not to beat you up if I cause trouble again." They took about 10 steps, but Wu Ronghua stopped and turned his head to look at me. His eyes were filled with resentment, paired with that little celebrity face, which was inexplicably strange. Fortunately, my eyes were good. Although I saw it, I ignored him and patted Lu Wei and the chubby guy on the shoulder, "Hurry up and cook." At this moment, Lu Wei whispered a sentence, "This kid is going to have bad luck these days." I paused for a moment and couldn't help but look at Lu Wei, realizing that his face still had a hint of solemnity. I didn't say a word, turned my head, and walked towards the senior sister who had been splashed with vegetable soup by me, apologizing awkwardly, "I'm sorry, senior. I've dirtied your clothes. Do you want me to help you wash them?" As soon as these words were spoken, I suddenly felt something was wrong with them. Sure enough, the friends next to my senior sister burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, this guy. At this moment, the senior sister also blushed slightly and quickly said, "No need, it's okay. I'll wash it myself later. That's not a good person just now. Please be careful in the future." Okay, thank you, senior. At this moment, I had time to carefully examine my senior sister's appearance. To be honest, she was really beautiful. 2 big watery eyes, black and long eyelashes, a small nose, and a slightly open mouth, complemented by a slight blush on little Guazi's face, appear fresh and refined. He is a little taller than me and has developed well. It's clear that I didn't mean to look at him. My senior sister nodded and smiled at me. Then, holding a plate of rice with her friends, she turned around and was about to leave. Halfway around, she turned back and playfully said something. "My name is Zhang Xiao, Class 9, Grade 2. If you have any questions, you can come to me." I stood awkwardly in place, unsure of what to say. The senior sisters left, leaving behind a string of silver bell-like laughter. When I turned my head and was about to sit down to eat, I saw Lu Wei and the chubby guy still standing there from the corner of my eye. So I lifted my head and looked at them. These 2 guys were hooked up, looking at me with an ant's smile on their face. With an inappropriate expression, Lu Wei spoke up, "Brother Nguyen, mighty and domineering." After speaking foolishly, he grabbed the fat man and went to eat, ignoring my contemptuous gaze. After finishing the meal, Lu Wei packed another dish of braised eggplant for Zhang Hua. The 3 of us just strolled around the school, and since vegetarian dishes are not afraid of the cold, we kept walking around. The school is quite large, with 3 teaching buildings, 4 dormitory buildings, 1 activity center, 1 teacher's office building, and dormitories. There are 2 playgrounds, one in front of the teaching building for morning exercises and the other behind the teaching building for physical education classes. There are basketball courts and football fields inside. Behind the big playground, there is also a courtyard with a row of antique bungalows inside. This is the classroom for art students, with a music room, an art room, and 2 rest rooms for sports teams. There are also pictures of the responsible teachers and their contact numbers hanging on them. When passing by the last room, Lu Wei's eyes lit up. Because there are various exercise equipment and sandbags inside, of course, the most important thing is that there are 2 girls inside, wearing tight pants and tight training clothes, with a curvy figure and a height of over 1.7 meters. They are talking and laughing inside, playing and making noise, and Lu Wei almost didn't leave his eyes on the window. This school is simply heaven. This is a growl left by Lu Wei when we dragged him away. If it weren't for us pulling quickly, the 2 girls inside would have come out. Zhang Hua's braised eggplant almost made Lu Wei throw it away. I forgot to mention that this courtyard only has a semi-circular entrance and a dark red wall in the front, which looks like the backyard of the palace in a palace drama. The 3 characters, Little Red Courtyard, are written on the entrance. There is no wall behind the house because there is a forest behind it, which is quite lush. In the middle of the yard, there is a small path winding deep into the forest, with no end in sight. Behind the forest is a mountain, not too high, but several tens of meters high. It must be the back wall of the school. Really, there is a support. We haven't entered the forest, so it's time to go back. Pack up, take a break, and we'll be gathering in the class in an hour. Returning to the dormitory, the remaining 6 people have also arrived, and Zhang Hua is still sleeping. It seems that he is sleeping soundly. Lu Wei hung the food by Zhang Hua's bedside and didn't wake him up. We greeted the others and then lay on our own bed, squinting. Chapter 9. What's fun to watch? You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 10. I go. Ghost possessed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey, slow down, what's nice to see? The chubby guy stumbled and I pulled to prevent him from falling. Running all the way to the entrance of the backyard of Yangjian, Lu Wei suddenly stopped and made a silent gesture. Shoo, don't shoot, quietly enter the village. After finishing speaking, with a strange expression on his face, he quietly led us in from the outside of the nearby forest. Wu Ronghua, this kid is dating the teacher. What? As soon as the fat man exclaimed in surprise, he was held down by Lu Wei's hand. Don't make a sound, don't let anyone notice. The three of us tiptoed for about 5 minutes before finally seeing two figures deep in the woods. It was Wu Ronghua and a teacher in his 20s and 60s, and the three of us quickly hid behind the bushes. The teacher was leaning against a tree, slightly taller than Wu Ronghua. Wu Ronghua was holding the teacher with his back to us, and the two were crazily gnawing at each other. Oh, slow down, what's the rush? A coquettish anger came, and then I realized that Wu Ronghua's hand had moved down. I couldn't see where he touched it, and it was blocked. Don't worry, I'm almost suffocating. Today hasn't been smooth at all. Fortunately, you're here. Wu Ronghua twisted his buttocks, even though this guy was quite handsome, his tone still made us feel nauseous. Yah, how fierce. The fat man stared intently, grabbing my shoulder with one hand and whispering softly. Explosive, right? This kid seduces the teacher and has money, no wonder he has all the benefits. Lu Wei hunched his waist, pressing the fat man's head with his left hand and supporting a tree with his right hand. There was nothing he could do. If he stood up, his bright training uniform would be exposed. At this moment, Wu Ronghua crouched down, his face pressed against the teacher's belly, and his clothes had long been untied. But almost as he crouched down, Lu Wei and I trembled. The teacher's face was too scary. Although a strong black aura filled the entire face, one could still see that it had decayed to the point of bones, with 2 rows of teeth white and a pile of red flesh hanging on it, like rags. 2 eyes were gray and white meaty balls, standing in their sockets. One head of long hair was like the long hair of a stray dog, black and gray, dirty and scattered over the head. Suddenly, her neck moved, and the sound of bone friction was clearly audible. As the head slowly lowered, an eyeball fell out, connected to a muscle, swinging in the air. Damn it, it's like this every time. You have to satisfy them well today. The voice was still delicate, accompanied by this terrifying face, which was truly strange. What's even more strange is that except for her neck and face, her body is no different from that of a big girl. TSK, this teacher is really good. Looking. How could he take a liking to his students? Why are you two trembling? Haven't you seen this scene before? The fat man had a lewd expression on his face, staring fixedly at those two people. The three of us were hunched shoulder to shoulder and squeezed behind the small bushes. Lu Wei and I were trembling at the same time, and all three of us felt it. Lu Wei looked at me in surprise, his eyes wide open. I also looked at him, and when I saw his incredible expression, I nodded lightly. Lu Wei seemed to understand something, then turned his head to look at the fat man. His expression suddenly changed 180 degrees, and he said with a cheap expression. Fatty guy, could you do me a favor and help me go back and get my phone? It's in my big red bag in the sports room. Get lost. The fat man didn't even think and responded directly. Fat master, grandpa, can you help me? After that, I'll introduce you to a beautiful sister. Suddenly, Lu Wei's tone became serious again. This is very important to me. I want to take this evidence and threaten him to give me the captain. I can't leave, I have to watch them. Sigh, okay, let me go pick it up without you bringing it, it will delay the good show and ruin the fun. The fat man let out a sigh and then secretly prepared to return the same way. Fat master, run, hurry up. Come on. Lu Wei continued to say humbly. Seeing the fat man walking away, Lu Wei immediately turned his head and stared at me, nervously asking. What did you see? Isn't this teacher human? I continued to stare, but my hand tightly grasped the stone on the ground and asked Lu Wei. What should I do? Fu Lu, Fa Ju, Dao Shu, what do you know? Lu Wei suddenly spoke concisely, but his speed suddenly increased. I don't know anything about it. I just saw a dead face and a face full of black anger. What? Can you see black gas? Alright, I'll go up later. If you see black gas coming from somewhere else, tell me loudly. Sleeping trough, are you going up to do it? Are you confident? When I was a child, that ancient big sister scared me. As I grew older, I became more and more afraid and felt that this thing was not easy to deal with. It's not too big, but this is just a ghost. Let's run away as soon as we get out. What if the chubby guy comes back and sees it? He hasn't seen it before, has he? It's okay, my phone is in the dormitory, he needs to flip through it for a while. Lu Wei looked at me with a sly expression. This guy is quite smart. After finishing speaking, Lu Wei stood up and rushed out, shouting while making strange movements with both hands. There are 3 strange stars in the sky, the sun, the moon, and the stars, which penetrate through the sky and startle the ghosts and gods. If there are ferocious gods and ghosts approaching, the ferocious gods and evil spirits will continue to kill. The sky is clear, and the earth is spiritual. The disciples are honored with the title of Sanmao Daozu, Hishan does not punish, Higui does not startle, and they sweep away all ghosts and evil spirits. I am honored with Sanmao Daozu's urgency as per the law, imperial decree. This guy runs really fast, at a distance of about 10 meters. I feel like if I had to count at a normal speed, I wouldn't be able to count 3. Just as Lu Wei rushed behind Wu Ronghua, he finished reciting and completed the strange movements of his hands. His left hand directly pulled towards the ugly face. Pop! The teacher fell straight to the side, and at the same time, Wu Ronghua had already turned around and didn't have time to help the teacher. Looking at his girlfriend who had already fallen to the ground and was smoking, he shouted angrily before reaching out to help. What's wrong with your grandfather? Behind you. Suddenly, I shouted loudly because I noticed that the teacher's face had returned to normal. But behind Lu Wei, a half-person tall black aura suddenly appeared in the air, several tens of centimeters behind him, and it was still spreading towards Lu Wei. The distance behind you with one arm is as high as you. After hearing this, Lu Wei kicked Wu Ronghua in the chest, who was about to pounce, but didn't have time to talk to him. He turned around and maintained the gesture with his right hand, throwing it directly at the black aura. Edict. With Lu Wei's explosive shout, the slap hit Black Qi directly. No surprise, under my command, it must have hit the bull's eye. Although there was no sound, judging from the constantly rolling and twisting state of the black air, it was still effective. The black air drifted back a few meters, becoming increasingly distorted. Finally, it slowly converges and in a few seconds, it forms a humanoid shape. Originally, I only looked at a face full of rotten meat, but now it's over. The whole body's rotten meat is hanging on the skeleton, accompanied by the sound of bone friction, and I almost vomited it on the spot. On the other side, Lu Wei took 2 steps back, casually plucked a few willow leaves, recited a spell, and threw it onto Wu Ronghua's face as he rushed towards him. What is this? Ah! Wu Ronghua's footsteps came to a sudden halt as he charged forward, pointing to the ghost in front and crying. Lu Wei ignored him and just casually left a sentence. Bring someone on, get lost.